All right, we're live. Well, we have a few things to look at today. I thought I'd start off by watching Mike the Vegan's new video responding to the vegan cancer study that has been doing the rounds this week. Let's take a look.
It's Mike here, and today, with all of the headlines about vegan cancer, should vegans be worried about this? And first, I want to just appreciate the wild world of conflicting news headlines. First of all, we have from the BBC, vegetarian diet lowers risk of cancer, study finds. And then the Telegraph title, always pro-meat, quote, vegetarian diet doubles risk of esophageal cancer. Okay, and then Daily Mail leading as usual with the anti-vegan sentiment of vegan diet raises bowel cancer risk. Alarming new study finds, but chances of other 5 major cancers are reduced in vegetarians. Yeah, vegetarians have higher risk of cancer, and then vegans also have this colorectal cancer risk concern now. What is going on here? Aren't they the ones that dodge processed meat? Hey, I've been vegan for 15 years, but apparently I need a hot dog to lower my colorectal cancer risk, according to the Daily Mail. So here I am at the hot dog stand. Sounds good to me, coming right up. Hey, yeah, looks like those Daily Mail checks have been paying off. Print another one. And yeah, this is a headline that has even made not normally vegan interested people come up to me and ask about it. So we absolutely need to cover this. You requested it as well. So we're gonna crack open the study, learn about it, and find some of the lesser trumpeted findings in there, such as one about vegans having lower prostate and breast cancer risk in a certain model. But most importantly for modern vegans, how does this fit into the actual landscape of cancer risk research for vegans? And of course, we're gonna ask, could there be another explanation for this number that they're finding? And there is, so let's go. I'm not here to say that vegans are perfect. Of course, in a scheme of higher and lower risk, some are gonna be higher and some are gonna be lower, but we have to look at the previous research here because cancer is an area where vegans have historically won. Right off the bat, we have a meta-analysis that I've mentioned before, this one, which found in terms of all cancers, vegans had a 15% lower risk, which is huge. And that's ironic because vegetarians only had an 8% lower cancer risk from that.
Interesting. Okay, so straight away, yeah, I appreciate the point about all the different headlines focusing on different types of cancer, and vegetarians have lower risk for this and vegans have a higher risk for that. The main relevant thing here is going to be overall mortality. In a prospective cohort study, that's the number of people who died in each group during the period of the study. So overall then, well, this is actually not even overall mortality, or, well, yeah, they do have all-cause mortality here, okay. So vegans are lower, but it doesn't, the line there crosses the 1, meaning that it's not a significant difference. That is its own, you know, we talk about the 5% threshold for a significant difference, right? This looks like it's only just crossing over, meaning that there's probably not 95% confidence that vegans have lower all-cause mortality, but there probably is 94% confidence. But if you're talking about cancer, all cancers, vegans have significantly lower risk of all cancers. Interesting then, yeah, as he's saying, that some news sources choose to focus on the ones where vegans are at higher risk, others choose to focus on the ones where vegans are at lower risk. But if we're looking at all cancers, vegans do have a significantly lower risk. And if we're looking at all-cause mortality, looks like vegans have a lower risk, but it doesn't quite reach significance there. So is it just going to be a case that the rest is cherry picking? It is still kind of weird that this particular analysis finds that vegans are at higher risk for colorectal cancer, because that is usually the ones where the risk from red and processed meat is most pronounced, as he's saying. So, yeah, we'll see.
And that's ironic because vegetarians only had an 8% lower cancer risk from that study. So the results are more or less flipped from the headlines. And from the Adventist data that we have.
Yeah, why? the headlines are all talking about the number of specific cancers where there's a lower risk. Vegetarians have lower risk of 5 different types of cancer. Unless you're somebody who's like only very concerned with esophageal cancer and you don't care if you get colorectal cancer, which why would anyone take that view? You're going to be concerned about all cancers or overall mortality. So,
for example, a 2025 study with
I keep on pausing it, but the number of cancers is a weird metric to go on because presumably the baseline risk for some of these types of cancer is exceptionally low. So if you have increased or decreased risk for an extremely rare type of cancer, then it kind of doesn't really matter, and it's not a useful way to interpret that result to like count up all of the different types of cancer where there's lower or higher risk, right?
Was published on that, and they found that the vegans trended about 12% lower for colorectal cancer risk and had a nearly 25% lower risk of total cancer, and that one was statistically significant. And yeah, those 2025 headlines went crazy. The Daily Mail came up and said, vegan diet slashes cancer risk by a quarter. Oh, sorry, that was actually on my list of things that never happened.
I was gonna say, he's made this up, hasn't he? Okay, yeah, that's not the right font or anything. Okay, I was like, did they really run this? No, they didn't.
Because of money. So how did the vegan cancer risk flip between previous research and this new study from the British Journal of Cancer? Well, let's just crack it right open. And we can see that some of those lower cancer risk trends, patterns still exist for vegans. For example, vegans had a lower hazard ratio for our most common cancers, breast and prostate cancer, but because of the size, the number of cases for that group, they weren't statistically significant in that model. There's another one again we'll get to. But to that main finding of concern, they claim the vegans had a 40% increased risk of colorectal cancer. You also see some headlines saying largest study so far. In one way that's true, in another way it's not really true. For example, it does have more different groups of people that it looked at. They were able to get some more cancer-specific data from different studies like the Million Women study that didn't previously publish it, but that was really a tiny amount of cases. So when we're looking at that total cancer being 25% lower for vegans, that was from about 8,000 vegans worth of data. But for this newer British study, we're still looking at about 8,000 vegans. So in terms of raw numbers, it's not outperforming that previous total cancer finding, and it just didn't even look at total cancer risk. It didn't ask that question. But okay, how...
That's interesting. Okay, so as I said, like looking at specific types of cancer, this is not how anybody thinks about their health, right? When you think about how you might die, presumably what you're looking to do is reduce your risk from all sources. The point of looking at overall mortality in these studies is exactly that, right? You're going to reduce your risk of dying from any particular source. So, yeah, again, unless you're thinking about this in terms of like, God, I really want to avoid getting prostate cancer, like, one way to do that is to smoke cigarettes. You'll probably die of lung cancer instead, right? Clearly, total cancer is what you would be concerned about, or more broadly than that, overall mortality. That's the ultimate metric. You can decrease your chances of dying from any particular cause just by increasing your chances of dying from another cause. You can decrease your risk of dying from heart disease by not wearing a seatbelt.
How did they make the vegan diet colorectal cancer risk look the same as eating a few servings of processed meat per day? Because that's really what we're seeing here. And that brings me to the most questionable part of this study, and that was adjusting for various factors as if they are independent from a vegan diet when they are largely dependent or connected to a vegan diet and the result. One such factor that they adjusted for here, which affects colorectal cancer, prostate cancer risk, and breast cancer risk, is BMI, which I've complained about before in the realm of epic Oxford data with bone fractures. And this...
Okay, yeah. Okay. This reminds me of the Garth Davis and Sean Baker debate that we watched, where Garth Davis brings up the thing where there's some study which showed that eating red meat did not increase your risk of heart disease, when controlling for cholesterol. It's like, well, that's the mechanism that red disease increases your risk of heart disease. So of course, if you control for that, then it's not going to show significance. Likewise here, I mean, what you want to do when you control for other factors in a study like this is to control for factors which are not connected. So smoking, for example, right? So, like, some vegans will smoke, and obviously that increases your risk of certain cancers. Some non-vegans will smoke, and vice versa, right? There's a proportion. Well, if you're trying to isolate the effect of diets, then you're looking to control for those kind of factors. So you would do some regression, do some maths to like get rid of the influence of those things. But if it's the case that meat eaters are more likely to be overweight or obese, which is the case, as a result of what they're eating, then it's not really fair to control that out, is it? It's like if we ran the study on wearing a seatbelt versus not wearing a seatbelt, but we said, like, well, we're going to ignore all the cases where the person dies from a car crash. So, well, that's the main mechanism why you would expect this to have an effect, right? So, okay, they controlled for BMI, which is probably not appropriate in this case because it's obviously directly linked to diet.
Study has a lot of Epic Oxford influence, but looking, for example, to that data on BMI of different diets, we can see that the Epic Oxford vegans had a much lower BMI.
Well, there you go.
Why does this matter? Because we also have trials showing that when people are put on a vegan diet, they lose weight. It has to do with calorie density, fiber content, water content, etc. That is a causal relationship. And that's been shown from many vegan trials, but the researchers go, oh, vegans are skinnier, so we're gonna actually ratchet up their colorectal cancer risk, their breast cancer risk, their prostate cancer risk because of that, as if it's completely unconnected and random. Like, let's use the accomplishments of vegans and use it against them. They also adjusted for a history of diabetes, which, as we know, you can see again from trials, people being put on a vegan diet, lowering things like hemoglobin A1C, fasting blood glucose, the markers of diabetes.
Yeah, this is a nuts way of doing this analysis. I wonder what this source that he's screenshotting here is. This looks quite cool. This is like some sort of summary of studies that, or expert opinions or something, is it? Does anyone recognize what this is? Hello, Pop Me. Nice to, haven't seen you around here before, but welcome.
Diabetes. But, oh, you know, it's...
yeah, I mean, you know, if you disagree with something that's being said here, then feel free to point me where it's wrong.
Clearly connected, we're just going to adjust anyway. And yeah, those Epic Oxford vegans had about half the rate of diabetes as the meat eaters. So you can see that there's definitely room for adjustment there. And in the realm of cancer, a lot of you guys are amazing and watched my Cancer NATO mini documentary. I know it's a ridiculous title, but it's on my home state having the fastest growing cancer rate in the US and second highest incidence. And in that, it was very clear that nitrates in the water are a major driver of our excess cancer. And we also have something called trihalomethanes, which is when we treat our water that has organic matter in it with chlorine, we get these compounds like chloroform in the water that are also associated with various cancers. But what gets both of these out of the water, that brings me to Cove Pure, today's sponsor, which is a reverse osmosis tabletop filter that removes 99.9% of impurities. It gets those nitrates out. It deletes those trihalomethanes, and it does it in a convenient way that you can even make hot water instantly from. Just press a couple buttons, boom, fill up your ramen. It's making my hot cocoa antioxidant medicinal drink with just a couple buttons immediately out of this thing. But yeah, mainly it's just been really great not drinking cancer water in the leading cancer growth state. It also gets out those PFAS forever chemicals. So if you would like to try it, all you need to do is click the link below or use the QR code on screen to get $200 off. All right, and so yeah, most of this data is once again Epic Oxford and Adventist data. They even pre-cleaned the Adventist data through a complicated harmonization process of the data sets, which they even published a whole nother study about, saying, yeah, even though there was a trending 12% lower risk of colorectal cancer, we're actually gonna tweak that, and that's actually gonna become a +2 colorectal cancer risk ratio. Add in the Epic Oxford and the other data sets and keep adjusting things, and boom, you've got a 1.4 risk. Thankfully, they were nice enough to share some supplementary materials, and we can see where BMI does make a difference. It makes about an 8-point difference for the colorectal cancer risk issue, and it actually pushes both that prostate and breast cancer risk, again, our two most common cancers, into statistically significantly lower for vegans. But again, that's just one adjustment factor. We also have another really interesting model that they did where they said, hey, if the cancer happened within the first 4 years of the study, we're gonna take that
Yeah, true. Tiang said that does make you worry. That does make you wonder what the original price is. Right?
out and just see what happens. It seems kind of random. Why would they do this? Well, we can look to Dr. Matthew Nagra, who I thought had a good, quick explanation of it.
And finally, when they removed the colorectal cancer diagnoses that occurred within the first 4 years, the association was no longer statistically significant. This suggests that the association between vegans and colorectal cancer risk may at least partially be driven by people who already had or were about to develop colorectal cancer. It could be the case that some people identified risk factors or started to develop signs or symptoms of colorectal cancer and then switched to a plant-based diet too little too late, rather than the diet being responsible for colorectal cancer.
And then because these cancers take 5 to 10 years or more to develop, that way we can sort of tease out what might be caused by the current diet or a previous diet. The most important finding there, with that 4-year mark, vegans don't have statistically significantly higher colorectal cancer rates anymore. Boom, it's gone. And it gets even more interesting because reverse causation could even play a role here, in which people who had some stomach issue, they had some stomach pain, which was actually from undiagnosed colorectal cancer, might have decided to go on a vegan diet because it hurt their stomach less. For example, I am actually sitting in front of you here today as a vegan because somebody had less stomach pain on a vegan diet, and then they told me about the benefits of a vegan diet and got me to try it. However, people weren't asked, did you go vegan because of digestive comfort? So that one can only remain a speculative hypothesis, but it's still possible and could explain some of the relationship. But you might be thinking, why would vegans not just be way lower in colorectal cancer? Aren't they doing all these things right with high fiber, etc.? Well, this brings me to the Epic Oxford cohort and really comparing them to the Adventist cohort, which again trended lower colorectal cancer, which, with a larger population could have been statistically significant, who knows? But as grateful as I am for the Epic Oxford population of vegans, they were paving the way. They were more or less pioneers, and we can really see that in the data. We can see things like the fact that they were only eating 7 more grams of fiber than their meat-eating counterparts is wild, and some of this comes from the Epic Oxford comparison population being healthier than, say, the average American. Also, that Adventist meat-eating population was much healthier than the standard American population as well, so they have a high bar to show an improvement from as vegans. But we can look at this chart of comparing the Epic Oxford.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Well, I'm trying to think that could kind of work both ways. One of the criticisms that you see of epidemiology is like the healthy user bias, where perhaps some people who are following a vegan diet are more healthy in other ways, like not smoking or exercising more, and therefore that could be responsible for some of the better health outcomes that they get. And in the Adventist studies, where they're looking at a particular religious group who already have a high bar of health in general, like this religious population doesn't drink or smoke already, I'm going to I'm going to probably eat this polygamy person in chat. Yeah, when you're already starting with people who have a higher, with people who are more healthy in general, I mean, I've thought of that as sort of controlling for that healthy user bias, but it's also if vegans are healthier in other ways, that difference from the general population is going to be even greater. Or like the meat eaters, I suppose what I'm saying is that the meat eaters in that population are going to be yeah, possibly closer to a plant-based diet than general meat eaters, I guess is the point being made here. And somebody said this to me as well, like, this is from a population which has a low overall meat consumption anyway. It's like, well, that's a reason to think even more that the vegan diet is having a positive impact then. Because there's like a modest difference in meat consumption. Whereas if you were to look at the general population, there's going to obviously be a larger difference in meat consumption. So, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the BMI controlling thing is crazy here. Like he's talking about these other factors, like the significance disappears once you take out people who have been vegan for less than 4 years, and there could be reverse causality and stuff like this. But for me, that's like a bit of diluting the main argument about having control for BMI, which is completely inappropriate to do in this context. I think that is that's enough. I mean, if there's other problems, then that's like, it's good to know about. But yeah, having control for BMI is not what you want to be doing.
To the Adventist vegans, and straight up we've got the 1990s as a start date for those UK Oxford vegans, and then the 2000s for the Adventist vegans. Why does this matter? This is where fortification of vegan products occurred, which shows up in the data of those Epic Oxford vegans being like the last group of Western vegans that we see a higher rate of deficiency in. We have study after study after study after study of the last decade or so showing no difference for a vegan B12 deficiency rates, even occasionally seeing higher B12 levels.
Yeah, I think I learned my lesson from Voldemort's Turban. I used to have a kind of attitude of like, well, everyone welcome, and maybe if they come here, then they'll be persuaded and so on. But it's actually not helpful to have people being disruptive when what we're trying to do is not... this channel is not to persuade meat eaters, really. The channel is mostly to get vegans into a community where the norm is doing effective activism. So I like to do like the carnivore debates and stuff like that, but in general I don't want a bunch of people in the chat who are just going to be disruptive and argumentative, and this isn't the chat where you come to debate about whether you should be vegan or not. So eat us, delete us, I'm afraid, believe me.
Levels in vegans than meat eaters, which is wild. But yeah, while those UK vegans had what I would consider a high level of B12 deficiency, the Adventist vegans from this recent study have no increased risk. Another one that has to do with immune and cancer is vitamin D, and the intake for the UK vegans was only 0.7, while the Adventists were at 2.3, which is over 3 times higher. We also have calcium as a potential buffer against colorectal cancer, though that's mainly mediated by bile acids, which we can see vegans having like a third as much bile acid. But the concept is that having that unneutralized bile acid can end up doing damage to the lining of your gut wall and potentially cause DNA damage in cancer. And the Epic Oxford vegans were only getting about 600 milligrams of calcium per day when the Adventists were getting 900. However, I will say they were learning, and over time, the calcium intake of the Epic Oxford vegans went up, actually. And another huge one is fiber. Well, there was a bit higher fiber for those Oxford vegans. It probably wasn't even meaningful. And this meta-analysis, for example, found a 10% colorectal cancer risk reduction for every 10 grams of fiber consumed each day. They didn't even hit that. They were at 26 grams and the Adventists were at 46 grams per day, a full 20 grams higher, nearly doubling it. And that brings us to that other area where the Adventists didn't do worse, but the Epic Oxford ones did, and that was fracture risk. That is higher than meat eaters in the Epic Oxford cohort, but not in the Adventist cohort. And as I mentioned before, that was only really true under a certain level of BMI. So as I have a whole video on, there's some interesting BMI dynamics there as well. So we have these starting in the early 90s, Epic Oxford vegans who essentially let slip a ton of major colorectal cancer resistance benefits unfortunately, whether we're talking about calcium, getting enough fiber, etc., which I think would have moved the needle favorably a lot, but that just wasn't there, and they were the single largest influence on this newer study. And another interesting point about the Epic Oxford vegans is, like other vegans, they have a higher socioeconomic status, which is adjusted for again. But unlike your typical more rich people, these people were more alternative health style. They were less likely to be getting certain medical interventions, as we know. So it's very possible that their socioeconomic status didn't actually help them as much as it normally would. And that's another thing that could move the needle unfavorably here, adjusting for something that they don't get a benefit from. We also have some good points made by Dr. Alan Desmond, who is a gastroenterologist.
Yeah, there's a little bit of speculation. I think it's probably fair to adjust for socioeconomic status. I would expect that to be positively related to health outcomes, but not like via veganism.
Plant-based out of the UK.
This is high-quality prospective data linking plant-based diets to lower cancer risk. The outlier finding on colon cancer risk is just that, an outlier. The authors themselves are clear that more data are needed before any broad conclusions can be drawn. So what are the take-home messages? The headlines are alarming, but the study findings are not. The consensus on plant-based diets reducing cancer risk has not changed and will not be changed by a single publication.
In the end, I think the most important perspective to have here is that from multiple studies, vegans have been shown to have lower levels of total cancer. And then also that because of these sort of funky adjustments, they adjusted away what would be benefits in terms of prostate and breast cancer, which are our main cancers. And then also us not seeing a statistically significant difference for colorectal cancer after that 4-year mark, again, implying that the cancer that made the difference could have started when these people were eating meat. So it could be a vegan diet being blamed for people eating meat who maybe changed their diet because of digestive discomfort. We don't know. So it's not the first time, and it will not be the last time, that vegan health risks will be amplified by them having better BMI numbers, lower diabetes rates, etc. It's frustrating. And yeah, I'll say it again, vegans are not perfect. Even if vegans do have 85% of the risk of standard cancer rates, annoyingly, still 8.5 out of 10 people that normally would get cancer will get cancer, and then it will probably be blamed on their vegan diet. So yeah, it is frustrating to see in a time when vegans aren't getting that many wins, something that they've historically won on, they're even losing on. So yeah, I love it. Love the times. Anyway, get some cleaner water and
although not actually, right? Worth making this clear, right? This is a result of bad analysis, basically. You don't need to understand all of the complicated maths that goes into regression adjustments like this, but it's just a case of if one of the major health benefits that has a knock-on effect to other health outcomes of a vegan diet is lower BMI, like you're less likely to be overweight and obese, and then in analysis, it would be like saying we're only going to look at the vegans who are overweight and obese. It's like, well, that's not really going to be a fair representation of the expected effects of a vegan diet then.
And try out Cove Pure. You can just click this QR code. That's not how QR codes work. Click the link below or use this QR code to get $200 off. And of course, let me know down below what you think about all of this. Are you still concerned by this study about colorectal cancer, or do you think that it is a paper tiger? All right, that's it for today. Feel free to like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Well, there you go. That was educational. I'd seen some of the headlines. I have to say the main headlines I've seen are about vegetarians having lower risk for 5 different types of cancer, which again, like a little bit of a silly way to do the analysis in one sense. Although I guess that's the only way that they did it. He said they didn't report overall cancer risk in that particular study. Don't know why you would do it like that. And yeah, I guess that having seen the pro-vegetarian headlines is probably a function of my own echo chamber on social media and so on. But nevertheless, I have, constructed a little bit of or built in a little bit of antagonism from some meatheads, particularly on LinkedIn. So the vegan higher risk of cancer headline did reach me. And yeah, it's interesting to see that that's basically a result of, you could say, overcorrecting for BMI. Hey, Private Goose Machine. Yeah, I think that Hive community is based. I'm on their Slack. Is it hive.org? No, that's something else. Oh, it's Join Hive, isn't it? Joinhive.org? There we go. Is it just the Slack that they have? Yeah, the Join This Hive Slack. I'm not in the habit of checking Slack, that's my thing. There's a lot of platforms that I'm on and connected to, but I'm not in the habit of looking at them. But yeah, this is a based community. I'll put a link to this in chat if people are interested in signing up to that. And yeah, hopefully, my main goal with doing the YouTube streaming is to reach a decent audience, which, you know, work in progress. I appreciate the 4 of you who are here. And then to basically encourage people to do effective animal advocacy and mainstream that as a concept. So there we go. Hey, I posted this yesterday about the EU ban on meat terms for plant-based and cultivated meat. Somebody pointed out to me that the way it's worded, these terms can only be used on products which are of substantial animal origin. And otherwise you actually can't use the term chicken, bacon, or beef, amongst a list of others, on product packaging. And of course that includes a bunch of just like other flavoured consumer packaged goods. So here's beef gravy, which is not substantially of beef origin. That's going to have to be called brown gravy now, is one bit of speculation. Smoky bacon crisps, that'll be gone. Roast beef flavoured Monster Munch, that's gone. Chicken and mushroom pot noodle, that's gone. These things are all going to be too misleading for consumers. So hopefully these other industries kind of wake up, realize how stupid this is, realize that this is going to affect their products and their packaging, and decide to do something about it and join the pushback against this. I say grateful that we live in a world where politicians can spend their time on this, because all of the important issues are already solved. Someone commented just now, as there are no monsters in them, will they have to be called Huge Hairy Thing Munch? Which I thought was funny. So there you go. That's some of the LinkedIn. That's some of the LinkedIn discourse. And you know what? We got a supportive comment from our friend Matt Acton. He says politicians should stay out of food production, distribution, and labeling altogether. The only people who should be deciding what to buy and sell are sellers and buyers. Technocratic busybodies, whether from Brussels, DC, etc., need to stay out of our diet. There you go. That's one thing we can agree on. I appreciate that. We're going to have a blossoming friendship, I'm sure. A few people saw our debate and have been like in the comment section atting him. I think he's going to be overwhelmed. But there we go. Right, I think I've got 1 or 2 things to do on Fast Action Network. There's not too many. And then we've got a good article about China and biomanufacturing. There's Tristan King, good lad. And we've also got a good Substack post from the Good Food Institute, which I actually didn't know that they had a Substack, but they've written something about ultra-processed foods, which is, of course, one of my favourite topics. So we'll take a look at that as well. This is just me taking this off tab so that I don't dox my details. And one to come on Hellman's India YouTube.
Dry bread poindi, creaminess vachindi. Hellman's mayonnaise.
Foreign adverts were always like deeply weird to me. But there you go. That was weird, right? Good. Right, that'll do. Let's do the GFI thing. Beyond the ultra-processed narrative. Our latest research shows how nutrition and consumer perceptions alike put plant-based meat in a different category than candy, chips, and soda. Well, I mean, obvious from the nutrition perspective. I'm interested to see what they have on consumer perceptions. If you've followed recent food headlines, you've probably heard the term ultra-processed food mentioned frequently, along with concerns about the health impacts of these foods. For many products categorized as UPF, these critiques are warranted, but they likely reflect nutritional characteristics common to many UPFs, not universal to the diverse range of foods that fall under that umbrella. That NOVA food classification system is often used to define ultra-processed foods. Pardon me, the NOVA food classification system is often used to define ultra-processed foods. But NOVA is based on production method and ingredient formulation, not nutrient profile. Many of the foods classified as UPFs are high in sodium, saturated fat, and added sugar, and low in fiber and micronutrients. Some are designed for hyperpalatability, making them easy to overconsume. On the other hand, processing itself can be a tool to improve nutrition. It can retain or concentrate beneficial nutrients, such as protein extracted from soy, and add others through fortification, like vitamin D in milk. Processing can also extend shelf life, reduce food waste, and enhance food safety. Yeah, I mean, I think I was always thinking of this from the perspective of the naturalistic fallacy, where people tend to think that natural things are good or healthy, and there's just no reason to think that, right? That's necessarily the case. So it's always kind of seemed dumb to me and seemed intuitive that, yeah, obviously there's loads of processing that you can do to foods that's going to make them more healthy, like the things that they're mentioning here. Fortification, concentrating protein, adding shelf life, right? So where does plant-based meat fit in? It's become a key question for unlocking broader consumer adoption, and there is a big opportunity if it's done effectively. GFI's US consumer segmentation found that well over half of consumers from Gen Z to Gen X are open to plant-based meat if it meets taste and price expectations and offers a compelling value proposition, which for many consumers centers on health. Here's the key takeaway from two new GFI resources. Plant-based meat has distinct nutritional advantages and is not linked to the negative health outcomes associated with most UPFs, and many consumers recognize it as a healthy choice. Plant-based meat is often classified as ultra-processed, but it may be the exception. Most plant-based meat products meet the definition of ultra-processed under the NOVA food classification system. After all, plant-based meat is designed to replicate the taste and texture of meat. That takes innovation, food science, and yes, processing. But nutritional science increasingly shows that plant-based meat stands apart from typical UPFs like candy, chips, and sugary drinks. GFI's recent white paper on the nutritional profile of plant-based meat summarizes what researchers consistently find when comparing plant-based meat to conventional meat. Plant-based meat is generally lower in calories, lower in saturated fat, free from dietary cholesterol, higher in fiber, comparably high in protein, and has other nutritional benefits. Yeah, this is exactly what I found. I've done a review of these studies, which I've probably brought up on stream before. Plant-based animal product alternatives are healthier and more environmentally sustainable than animal products. This is an open access article, so you can share this around. People can get the full PDF. There's no paywall on this. So I just shared the link to that in chat. This is a few years old now, but basically it makes the point well. I think this looks at 40-something studies. Yeah, 43 studies on the healthiness, environmental sustainability of plant-based animal product alternatives. And we put it right there in the title, just so that it's nice and clear. But yeah, this is pretty much the bullet point list. A systematic review and meta-analysis of 7 randomized controlled trials found that consuming plant-based meat was associated with lower LDL cholesterol levels, that's the bad cholesterol, which could reduce risk of cardiovascular disease. And importantly, studies examining UPFs typically don't include plant-based meat, meaning broad claims about the negative impacts of ultra-processed foods often aren't actually based on evidence about plant-based meat. Processing is a perception gap, but not necessarily a purchase barrier today. Consumers who care about healthy eating aren't always consistent with how they treat processed foods. In GFI's newly released consumer study on how health perceptions shape plant-based meat choices, we found that many US consumers express conflicting views about food processing. A majority say they try to avoid processed foods, but a majority also say processed foods are safe in moderation, an outlook that aligns with guidance from many health authorities. What makes GFI's research unique is that it went beyond what consumers say they care about in surveys. It paired consumer attitudes with verified purchase data to compare what consumers say they want with how they actually spend at the grocery store. Yeah, I mean, I think this is underselling it, right? Processed foods are safe in moderation. The point is there are actually health benefits from plant-based meat. Plant-based meat is healthier than meat. So never mind safe in moderation, this is going to give you better health outcomes if you are swapping out meat for plant-based meat. Consumers who say they avoid processed foods spend less on categories like candy, cookies, and frozen meals, but not less on plant-based meat. Ah, okay, here we go. Here's the interesting consumer data. We found that conflicting attitudes about processed foods are reflected in purchase behavior. Consumers who say they avoid processed foods but still buy items typically viewed as processed, like chips, cookies, and frozen meals. However, they spend less on those products than consumers who don't say they avoid processed foods. Okay. So they are spending less on these, like, classic, obviously unhealthy things like crisps and biscuits. Sorry, chips and cookies, the Americans. Purchase data reveals a different story for plant-based meat. Buyers who say they avoid processed foods spend just as much on plant-based meat as those who don't. Okay, this is the interesting finding then. That's despite the fact that plant-based meat buyers are more likely than others to express concerns about processed foods. That's interesting. Plant-based meat buyers compared to non-plant-based meat buyers then are more likely to express concerns about processed foods. So what is this suggesting? That there is kind of a more nuanced understanding than we might sometimes fear when we're looking at the UPF discourse broadly. Often the people who are saying that they're worried about processed foods are nevertheless buying plant-based meat, and plant-based meat buyers are the most likely to say, I'm worried about processed foods. So maybe they are getting the point that even though plant-based meats are in this scary category called processed foods, they are nevertheless essentially a health food. This is an important insight for the industry because it suggests that while processing concerns are real, they may be more of a messaging and trust challenge than a major driver of purchasing behavior today. Okay. Health-focused consumers actually spend more on plant-based meat. Okay. Another signal that consumers treat plant-based meat differently from other processed foods is how spending changes based on health motivation. Plant-based meat consumers who strongly agree that health is their top consideration when buying food purchase plant-based meat more often, spending 56% more than those who disagree. Okay, fuck. Okay, this is really, in one sense, surprising. I mean, this is rational for people who do understand that despite being in the category ultra-processed foods, plant-based meats are in fact healthier than meat and are basically a health food. I wouldn't have thought that many people get that. But this is saying that people who say their health is their top concern are spending 56% more. That's a lot more compared to people who don't say that health is a top concern for them. Even if general concerns about processed food don't affect plant-based meat spending, consumer purchases do appear to respond to two signals often associated with processing: long ingredients lists and unfamiliar ingredients. Around 10 ingredients appears to be a tipping point. Beyond that, many consumers say a product has too many. I mean, okay, this is more like the IQ I expect from the average consumer. Again, like, why would you think that having lots of ingredients makes a food unhealthy? That has never made sense to me. While many plant-based meat ingredients are viewed positively, some prompt hesitation, with ingredients like methylcellulose more likely to be avoided. Yeah, I don't know if there's any reason to actually be avoiding methylcellulose. I don't think so. But it was one of the big targets of the meat industry campaign against plant-based meats. And of course, it's a $10 word and difficult to spell and pronounce, so people are like, yeah, presumably this must be bad. There's room to improve products and perceptions to unlock demand. Alright, let's go. While plant-based meat has several nutritional advantages relative to conventional meat, opportunities exist to further improve the nutritional profile of some products, such as reducing sodium levels, improving fat quality, or considering alternatives to certain ingredients. Any reformulation, though, should not compromise taste, which is the top factor impacting whether consumers choose to eat plant-based meat. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, yeah. Reducing sodium levels, sure. Improving fat quality, sure. Again, though, for the most part, these are not things that are any worse in plant-based meat than they are in conventional meat products. I've done another little comparison of this lately, and conventional meat, the format, if you compare format to format, the formats of plant-based meat that have high salt also have high salt in the conventional meat. So like plant-based bacon, for example, that's typically something that does have a lot of salt, probably not going to be that healthy. But it has less salt than conventional bacon. So, again, it's all relative, right? Our consumer research shows that improving these nutritional attributes could motivate consumers to choose plant-based meat more often, so could clearer communication of the health benefits plant-based meat already delivers. As we've highlighted earlier in the Substack series, many consumers don't realize that plant-based meat delivers on common health priorities like protein and gut health. In fact, many plant-based meat products already meet or exceed consumer expectations for protein and offer unique advantages such as fiber and lower saturated fat, but awareness is lagging. Yeah, that's right. This is why this is what I would have thought, right? This is why I'm always banging on about plant-based meat being healthier than meat, because presumably most people are not really aware of this. That creates clear opportunities to deepen engagement with plant-based meat, such as highlighting protein content, educating on fiber and gut health benefits, emphasizing low saturated fat and zero cholesterol, leveraging the lack of hormones and antibiotics. Yeah, highlighting protein content, this is something that has been shown to boost selection of plant-based products. And most plant-based meats that I've looked at are qualifying for the source of protein on packaging claim. And many of them are also qualifying for the high-end protein on packaging claim. This is based on EU standards, which are 12% and 20% of calories, respectively. So a lot of them are already at that level, but I'm not necessarily saying that on packaging. Additionally, information on the ingredients and processes used to make plant-based meat may help consumers feel even better about the products. The takeaway is clear. Plant-based meat may be processed, but it doesn't fit the typical ultra-processed food narrative. Many consumers seem to recognize that distinction, and the industry can build on it by strengthening awareness, education, and transparency. Well, there you go. Good bit of research from GFI there, reiterating the health benefits of plant-based meat as we know, especially compared to conventional meat. And then some surprising stuff on some consumers seeming to be aware of this to some extent, as well as helpful suggestions of how plant-based meat producers can improve that even further. So, yeah, nice. That was a good little read. I enjoyed that. I want to have a look at this article in Farmers Weekly. Pig industry responds to London Underground ad campaign. This is a campaign run by the Animal Justice Project on the London Underground currently, where they have these images of pigs in cages. And the tagline here, if she were a dog, we'd call it abuse. And this is a response from some of the pig industry. The pig industry has expressed frustration over a 2-week campaign by Animal Justice Project on the London Underground, which has placed 22 large posters across 12 stations urging commuters to stop eating pig meat. The posters, which measure 2 meters by 3 meters, feature 2 designs. One places a piglet alongside a puppy, and the other shows a sow in a farrowing crate with the words, "If she were a dog, we'd call it abuse." They have been positioned directly opposite platforms to face passengers waiting for trains at Liverpool Street, King's Cross St Pancras, Waterloo, Euston, Vauxhall, South Kensington, Camden Town, Finchley Central, Tottenham Hale, London Bridge, St John's Wood, and Charing Cross. Animal Justice Project says its Project Pig campaign is expected to reach 5.7 million commuters. Both posters urge the public to end pig farming and direct them to the campaign website. Lizzie Wilson, Chief Executive of the National Pig Association, said, "This is yet another campaign designed to emotionally blackmail the general public into becoming vegan, a tactic that is not particularly well received." There's a lot interesting about this quote. First, of course, the term emotionally blackmail. Like, there's the suggestion that there's something pernicious being done here. Blackmail. Blackmail is illegal, right? You're emotionally blackmailing them. Like, they're just posting a picture of a pig production facility. A pig farm. This is what it looks like. And, yeah, if she were a dog, we call it abuse. This is just a statement of fact. So, if you find that to be emotional blackmail, it's more of a reflection of the reality that we're just putting on a poster than it is a suggestion that the animal advocates are doing something pernicious or villainous or wrong. Right, I don't find that to be any problem. Of course, this is designed to evoke an emotional reaction. And of course, the goal is to get people to stop eating pigs. Problem? And then the other thing they said is a tactic that's not particularly well received. Well, what? By the pig farmers? By the pig farms? By the National Pig Association? Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be well received by the National Pig Association. Problem? are you saying it's not particularly well received by the general public? Because that's where I would give some contention. Like, images like this, I think this is actually an extremely well-designed campaign from Animal Justice Project. Images like this are amongst the most impactful that you could put if the goal is to get people to reduce their pork consumption. So in that sense, yes, they are actually very well received. Now, do people like looking at this? Probably not. So in that sense, you could say, well, this is not well received. But this is not something that people are supposed to like. It's supposed to get people to change their behavior. So it's a very, very limp criticism from the National Pig Association. A tactic that's not particularly well received. Like, images of pigs, first of all, pigs are the most emotive of the farmed animals that you could show in a situation like this. So they'll tend to get more of a reaction than showing chickens or fish or cows even. Right, we've got zoomed in on one animal. We speak a lot about scale neglect here. We've got zoomed in on one animal. We can even see the animal's eye. It's in a small cage, which most people are going to find objectionable. There's actually a lot about this which is very, very well designed. I think this is actually a very good, very, very good campaign from Animal Justice Project. I bring up this article quite a lot. Yeah, there's a bunch of studies which find that animal cruelty messaging is the most impactful when it comes to this kind of campaign, compared to, for example, talking about environmental effects or health effects. Animal cruelty images in particular are very, very compelling in getting people to change their diet. We've got a bunch of examples of this. Found that animal cruelty produced the highest percentage of people continuing eliminating their product of animal products. Animal cruelty, the most effective at inspiring change. "51% who saw an animal cruelty message intend to reduce their meat consumption, compared to over 41% of an environmental message." Like, there's a lot of studies all pointing in the same direction, and even the details of this. Yeah, even the details of this. There's a study which looked at the type of photos of farmed animals which are most effective at inspiring dietary change. Photos of sicker injured animals are most impactful, followed by photos of animals confined in small cages. I think this is also, where we see the pigs being the most sympathetic in purple here, only outdone by chimps and dogs, which, like, of course, you wouldn't put on a poster in this context. So you've got the most compelling animal, the most compelling overall message, like, in the best situation in terms of being compelling. This is a really, really well-designed campaign by Animal Justice Project. So well done them. And, like, boo to this person from National Pig Association, designed to emotionally blackmail the general public. Like, okay, it's her job to push back on this kind of stuff, but this is just so weak. A tactic that's not particularly well received. Like, tell me you don't know anything about animal advocacy. Consumer spend on pork is currently 2%. It's currently up 2.5% year on year due to being a reasonably priced protein source that also delivers health benefits. Any evidence of this? Any evidence that pork delivers health benefits? When study after study finds that, in particular, red meat is likely to increase your mortality, overall mortality, increase your risk of heart disease, increase your risk of cancer. Any evidence at all that pork is delivering health benefits? So I hope the Animal Justice Project is not at all put off by this stupid response from the pig industry. Like, we need much, much more of this. I give money to Animal Justice Project, and I'm really pleased to see it being spent this way. I would love to see this type of material plastered all over the underground constantly. And I'm sure that this weak response from the National Pig Association is going to do very little to put them off doing similar campaigns in the future. I certainly hope that's the case. And it goes on. In addition, we produce pork via a variety of different welfare-based systems to cater for lots of ethical purchasing choices, and we'll continue to meet consumers' demands accordingly. Like, this is not saying anything in defense of their practices. It's like, we have some more or less abusive systems to cater for lots of different ethical purchasing choices. Some people like the factory farming. Some people want the cages to be even smaller. This is really... I mean, I always try and think about the psychology of these people. Oh, no picture. Look at that. No picture on the LinkedIn. Oh, here's the pigs. Here's the people. Here's the animals that she's going to be sending into the gas chambers. That's an interesting choice. No picture on the LinkedIn. It's as if she's ashamed to share her face in association with her profession. "15 years in the National Pig Association, and then another year before that in, again, the pig killing industry. Looks like probably private school before that. What a detestable human. Well-funded. Alistair Driver, editor of Farmers Weekly, sister title Pig World, said this is another chapter in a sustained campaign targeting the pig sector by well-funded and well-organised animal welfare campaigners trying to turn people away from eating pork. Yeah, this is not half as well-funded as it needs to be, by the way. At the end of the day, I love this campaign. At the end of the day, this is, I think, a 2-week campaign. Yeah, 2-week campaign. So realistically, we need to see this kind of stuff year-round if we're going to put a dent in the gas chamber machine. So I don't know why saying well-funded would be any kind of like insult or diss, even if it were the case, but actually I don't think it is the case. This needs far more funding for this. The industry is rightly proud of the high welfare standards seen across its varied production systems, while also in some cases being aware of things that could be done better. So again, they're talking about varied production systems. Like, you're giving the game away here that you're speaking for including the factory farms. In some cases, we're aware of where things could be done better. Is this one of those cases? Or is this pretty typical, actually? I think this is pretty typical, actually. This is the Farmers Weekly website, and we have essentially the same picture over here used as a picture for one of their articles. It's just got a bit nicer lighting and colouring. But basically, we're looking at a pig in a small cage so that she can't turn around. Like, this is an image just used on the Farmers Weekly website. So it's not like this is like unrepresentative or something. This is the typical pig farming environment. Addressing the details on the posters, he added that farrowing crates have long been used in the industry as a means to protect piglets in the early weeks of their life. The UK pig sector is in the midst of a voluntary transition ahead of formal government proposals expected later this year, away from traditional crates towards higher welfare flexible systems that confine sows for a shorter period, while also protecting piglets when they're at their most vulnerable. So I like their framing as a voluntary transition because we're expecting regulation this year. Like, we're stopping doing this out of the goodness of our hearts, and also because it's soon going to be illegal. For higher welfare flexible systems that can find sales for a shorter period. Oh, right, great. So you're not going to be using the cages anymore. No, we are still going to be using the cages, just for not quite as long. Well, like, this is the best that they can say. This is them giving the best defense that they can give of the pig farming practices. And by the way, one thing to say about people in this kind of role, their job is to defend these systems. Right, so they're going to say the best thing that they can to try and defend these systems. And it's not on them to point out that, yeah, they're actually pretty shit, they're actually pretty awful, we're actually abusing animals to the nth degree. That's on us to point that out. Okay, that's on us to point that out. So it's on us to fund campaigns like this from Animal Justice Project, which show people the reality of this. And it's on them, it's literally their job. If they didn't do it, they'd be fired, to make excuses for it and say, this is emotional blackmail and this is not well received. Like, maybe this person feels bad about her job and she's deliberately given a completely weak response as a result of that. But it's not on her to be pointing out that her industry is extremely abusive. It's her job. She will lose her job if she doesn't do it, to obfuscate and make excuses for the abuse. And if I were in her position, I'd be thinking, well, I hope that the animal advocates do a good job of pointing out that I'm talking shit. Obviously, I have to talk the shit. I'm a shit talker. That's my job. And I'm ashamed of that, and so I don't put a picture of myself on my LinkedIn profile. But I have to obviously talk the shit. Hopefully the animal advocates do a good job of pointing out that I'm talking shit and pointing out that actually this is a pretty accurate depiction of typical pig abuse and pig farming. So we must not be at all put off by the shit talkers talking the shit that they're paid to talk. We have to be relentless in pointing it out and saying, wow, the best you can say is that you have varied production systems. Wow, the best you can say is that you're going to have pigs in cages for a shorter period of time now because there's going to soon be laws saying that you have to do that. That's actually the best defense that you can offer. Wow. That's pathetic, first of all. This is abusive. And the people who, again, it's their job to defend it, but you can do another job. Right? If you're one of the people who your job is to go to the media and make excuses for what you know is animal abuse, you are a weak person. Do another job. Stop being weak. Stop making excuses for this. And good on Animal Justice Project for doing this campaign. Here, we've got a bit from Animal Justice Project at the end. Ayrton Cooper, campaigns director at Animal Justice Project, said, "Our London Underground campaign invites commuters to pause and reflect. By placing a pig in a crate alongside the words, 'If she were a dog, we'd call it abuse,' we challenge the deeply ingrained perceptions many of us have grown up with. When the same suffering is accepted simply because the animal is a pig, we must ask difficult questions. We hope these adverts plant a seed of compassion, spark meaningful conversation, and build momentum toward ending factory farming altogether." Yeah, there's so many signals to me that the people involved in this stuff are ashamed of it. They know that they're doing the wrong thing, really. The fact even that this article in Farmers Weekly ends with a nice quote from the person at Animal Justice Project explaining the campaign and saying, we're just trying to reduce animal abuse here. Like, the person who's written this, maybe they know as well, right? Now, again, it's their job to cover the industry response, and they have to report the propaganda that the National Pig Association and Pig World are putting out, and the justifications and so on. But maybe they're thinking, well, look, realistically, the vegans are right. We don't need to be breeding pigs into a world of being entrapped in cages like this for most of their lives and being abused and killed in gas chambers. We don't actually really need to be doing that. I love that the chief executive of the Pig Association won't put a picture on her LinkedIn. Like, that is a sign of being ashamed of what you do, isn't it? Let's see if this person has a picture. Oh, they do. Oh, it's just showing me their articles. I guess they have to have a picture on their website, hey? But yeah, fuck these people, seriously. They're detestable humans. If you choose your job, again, you can choose a different job. If you choose to do the job where you make excuses for this, then yeah, you're a detestable person. And good on Animal Justice Project for running this campaign, and for not being scared off it by the stupid responses from the National Pig Association and Pig World. And shame on the people who are making excuses. Right, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you for watching, for those who tuned in. Covered a few good things. I'm glad that we got to talk about that Project Pig campaign and the pathetic excuse of a response from the pig industry. Glad that we watched that Mike the Vegan video as well. That was very interesting about that new cancer study that came out this week. And how they have likely just overcorrected by controlling for BMI, which is of course a health benefit of being vegan. And yeah, there we go. We had a couple. What else did we look at? The GFI piece about ultra processed foods, which was good. Some interesting consumer data there. And we're going to have some more good stuff when I stream again, most likely next week. Yeah, thank you, Young Say. I appreciate you. Thank you, fake vegan. Interesting username. I know how to think of that. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll get some good clips from this, and I will see you guys next stream. Take it easy. Cheers.